welcome to the Revive Ministries Podcast. This month we are addressing building a safe community. Today we have a new guest. Her name is Dr. Lisa Smith. Is that correct?
That is correct. Good
I,
morning, everyone. How are you?
I really appreciate every single guest that comes on. It's not always easy to talk about these topics, even as broad as it seems, as building a safer community. But when we think about it in our own lives and what that means, it could be unpacking that could be a lot more unfortunately messy. So today, I just want to thank you for coming on. I have a disclaimer for those who are listening or watching around the world. Wherever you're at, find what resources are there. Find what helps you, whatever that is. In the United States right now, they have 988 as a suicide crisis lifeline. But whatever avenues, whatever population or groups you're in, find what works for you when it comes to resources. I want to, I don't like reinventing the wheel, working in the mental health community. I really want to help those find what has worked for them in the past. Dr. Lisa, people say it better than I do. And I remember before we started recording, you said these quotes are amazing. Yeah, because it's not just me, it's everyone else. I just love how quotes kind of capture the essence of what we're trying to bring out. So it's from H. Jackson Brown Jr. We'll start there. Remember, the happiest people are not those getting more, but those giving more. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Yes, I believe that we are here to aid one another. So, any kind of civic service or anything that you can do to help others that are less fortunate than you or do not have the knowledge, it is our duty from generation to generation to teach each other. And I do that in all walks of life. I teach my students that civic service and public service is so valuable
Mm-hmm.
for a community.
I think when I think about community, it's inclusive, not exclusive. So in that regard, everything you do, I feel it all kind of helps the community. And when we're thinking about just where we may live in that regard, but also in our home, it all starts from home. How's your family at home? How you connect with one another. So remembering when we think about safe community, it starts from you, from yourself, and how you respond and react. Because a lot of times we're not granted maybe the community we would like to be in. And a lot of times, sometimes there's some rough things that may have, we might be introduced to at a very early age. But at the same time, not to minimize this, I do feel that it is still appropriate, like in H. Jackson Brown, that we gain more from because we're not islands. We're not
Right.
islands. We do need each other, even though if you're introverted or not. But the connection part, a lot of times, is vital when it comes to our mental health, and when it comes to community, and when it comes to feeling safe. Um, I just want to, you're a new guest, and I like to always, kind of showcase a little bit more, so those who are listening, those who are watching, just get to know you a little bit more. Dr. Lisa, would you mind sharing a little bit about your story, what you do, just whatever you feel comfortable? Just give you an opportunity to share what you can.
Absolutely. So I am an advocate, a hypnotherapist, a college professor, and I teach psychology and criminal justice courses, as well as human services courses. I've been doing this for the past 20 years. My advocacy started in 2006, and I run Right to Consent, which is a sex crime reporting site that encourages people to report sexual violence, especially since the most vulnerable population are children and teens under the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my mission. I will leave this earth knowing that I did some good by sharing the knowledge that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually victimized. More importantly, CPS in every 9 minutes uh, confirms a case of sexual violence against children, and that's nationwide.
Mm.
So the stakes are high, they're extremely high.
Mm.
And we as a community at the grassroots level need to become more proactive than reactive, because reactive means that it's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to stop that with parents being more knowledgeable and children being more educated about the possibility or the propensity for a sex offender to groom not just the child, but the family.
Yeah, and in regards to a lot of those who are listening, you know, these are topics that a lot of times no one wants to talk about. I understand why. It's messy, like I said, a lot of times. But when we talk about building a safer community, when you have a safer community, what usually happens? It means that people actually may share something that has happened to them. Viktor Frankl, I kind of pulled this out because I read his book and I really appreciate what his quote says. Listen to you. It says, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing: the last human freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." When you have a safer community, no, it provides an avenue for someone to get the help they need. The three hardest words to say is, "I need help." And like, if we provide a safe community, what you're as inspiring, what you're doing is inspiring, is providing that safe community so those people under 18 can say, "I was hurt, I need help." And obviously, we want to educate the parents. We want to educate those family, because a lot of times the ones who are the abusers are the ones closest to the individual. They're close. They're within the family
Absolutely.
circles. So it's being cautious. And I do commend you. It's not a very easy subject. Working in the mental health field, I see the aftermath of what happens when someone who hasn't been addressed for years, and they become adults and they see me. so uh,
Right, right.
it's not something that you could brush under the rug and think it'll just fix itself. And I feel that building a safer community becomes less tangible, like a building, but more about the people around the individual. So um, I do appreciate what you're doing. Service and community, a lot of times, like we said, our work hand in hand. In the macro sense, we're thinking about less crime. We're talking about these kind of communities where we hold people accountable if they hurt people. We try to protect those who are helpless. But in the
Mhm.
more micro sense, I mean, it makes it's the feeling of feeling supported. You can be around a lot of people, Dr. Lisa,
Right.
and people are like, "Oh, we're here for you," but you don't feel it. And if you don't feel it, your mind's
Does
you're
it
still alone.
exist?
Yeah, it doesn't exist. And I feel that sometimes gets kind of gets thrown under in the cracks, because it doesn't really get, the person's like, well, he's around a lot of people. And I feel in time, unfortunately, people are less able to communicate what their needs are. And the
And the
sense of,
trust and the
yeah.
faith that they need, and the hope. If they don't see people actively, or they don't see the action, or feel
Hmm.
the actions, or
Hmm.
can see the outcomes, then to me it's conversation, it's an agenda, it's and
Hmm.
conversation does not help the healing process.
No, when the person feels that they're a burden for you listening to them, when they feel that when they're talking, all they're gonna get is a lot of should have. You should have done this, you should have done that. Not, hey, let's see what we can do now. No, it's all in the past that you made the mistake. And it doesn't really help, doesn't encourage the continued communication. And I would say it was even worse. We still don't know what the effect of the pandemic was. The pandemic, as we kind of creep our way out, sort of, it has changed what the definition, words change, how we define things. Safe community, what does that mean? A lot of people were stuck at home, working from home.
Right.
And one thing I will say this, Lisa, I felt it really heavy when I went to a store. I was just buying. I had my mask on. I was buying something, and the level of urgency. There was no small talk. It was just like, and I realized what I missed. All that stuff that we used to take for granted. The cash register person who
Right.
who used to talk these small
Chat
talks.
you up. Yep.
it was gone, and it felt empty a little bit for me. I want to ask you, and from your experience, from your several years, you've been doing this for a while. What has your experience been with navigating through adjusting, the changes of life and maintaining what has helped you maintain a safe community at home with the people you work with? What has been the positive? What hasn't worked? I guess I know I worded this kind of clunky, but what would you say was helpful in maintaining a safe community from your experience, and what has not been helpful?
Well, from my experience, especially with my family, is communication, a large amount of communication. But that can't really happen if there's no trust between parents and children.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing I tell my family members all the time is that people disappoint you. Yes, they
Mm-hmm.
do. But one of the things about communication is that you tell your family member what your needs are and what you expect of them to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
What I have found in working with at-risk families or children and their families, because that's how I came to learn so much and have so much knowledge about sexual violence, is that oftentimes a child or a teen would end up in my office.
Mm-hmm.
One of the programs that I worked or um, was a director in, and they'd end up in my office and they'd come in with one mental health issue
Mm-hmm.
that ballooned into this sexual assault, maybe recurring sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was when I would, because I'm a mandatory reporter,
Mm-hmm.
as a professor as well as a counselor, what I would find is that when I would tell parents, parents saw me as an obstacle. They saw me as someone who should be silenced. I've been threatened by fathers. I
Mm-hmm.
have been yelled and screamed at by parent mothers because they did not want to know that this had happened to their child. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take that as an affront. No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because many people engage in what we call denial,
Mm-hmm.
inaction, and information suppression when it comes to sexual violence. I call it DIS theory. I talk about it in my book, The
Mm-hmm.
Blaming and Shaming of Defenseless Victims in America's Rape Culture. What happens is a family member or a parent or even a sibling experiences denial because it's easier
Mm-hmm.
when they know that they weren't there to stop it or prevent it or help them. And that's what I want parents to know, and older siblings and caring, loving family members, is that when your child or your teen is approached, you're not going to be in the room. So there's no need to deny that it happened. There's no need to shoot the messenger, which I am.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need, right? The question is, are we going to act? And
Mm-hmm.
if you do nothing, then the stakes are high because the undetected sex offender remains undetected, which
Yeah.
means that there are other children and teens that can be victimized. This is what we have seen over and over with the Catholic priests, with
Mm-hmm.
the Boy Scouts of America.
Mm-hmm.
We moved these offenders around. They remained undetected, and other families were victimized. And so that's why I say to parents specifically,
Mm-hmm.
the conversation needs to start because you're not going to be in the room. And if you're not in the room, how can you prevent it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're not there, how do you prevent it? So the denial and the inaction, we have right now, the statistics on RAIN's website says that out of 1,000 sex offenders, 995 will not be prosecuted. 5 out of 1,000 is
Mm-hmm.
0.005%,
Mm-hmm.
which means that it is on us to act. That inaction is so prominent that we are not reporting this. And since we don't report this, then they can move from community to community
Mm-hmm.
and they can victimize others. And if we suppress the information suppression
Mm-hmm.
means that nobody knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know there is a lot of embarrassment associated with having these types of conversations and telling your story.
Mm,
But it needs to happen. First of all,
mm,
it's a catharsis for the
mm,
child or the teen to
mm,
tell their parents and to know their parents will do something.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree in the sense that it has to start with communication. The idea is, um, like you said, to feel that you will be in the room is kind of you're rolling the dice. At the end of the day, knowing what's you can't keep your kid in the bubble. Unfortunately, you can't. They're gonna be growing up, and that's the one thing that keeps happening. They keep growing up, and I do feel education, understanding what's out there, um, personalizing. That's one thing I learned. Also, especially a lot of times we like to generalize when it comes to these kind of situations, but make it personal to you. Like the situation is your situation, not oh I heard. A lot of times I tell my people come to my office, I'm like, don't listen to your neighbors. I want to hear from you. Like don't
Right,
listen to like what is it? Why does it impact you? And a lot of times, yes, it's hard work. But at the end of the day, it's not it's not the hard work that you need to look at the individual itself. So why am I doing this? Why am I caring so much? Because of Susan, whoever that is, whoever
right.
that individual is. So I do commend you because this is a difficult conversation. No, there's a lot of shame. It's like, oh, especially after it happens. It's
Right.
like, and then like you said, the denial is, I can imagine, very, very heavy. And the problem is, not only is the offender out there, but it never gets addressed with the individual, and that person
Right.
keeps growing up, and unfortunately, you see them in the legal system a lot of times, bouncing around,
Right.
cycling, and then
Right.
eventually they'll, hopefully they get the care, but it's years, and just like as you mentioned before, but a lot of times these problems, if they've been for years, it's not going to be solved in one day. It's not going to be
Right.
solved by one conversation. It's going to be solved by many conversations. So give yourself a little bit of grace for yourself, for your kid, whoever. The idea is it is messy out there. And if anyone says there's any shortcuts, that's a lie. There's no shortcuts. It's just learning as much as you can, being
Right.
conscious. You cannot predict things like that are uncertain, but you can be aware of certain signs, certain things like to be aware of. There's someone trying to groom. Could you kind of share a little bit of your insight, being in the field, this area? What
Yes.
are some signs that parents may want to be aware of when it comes to grooming, when it comes to people, things like that nature?
I'm glad you mentioned grooming because most of the resources talk about the grooming of the child,
Mm-hmm.
but the family, especially if they're under the age of 10,
Mm-hmm.
the family is groomed. How is
Mm-hmm.
the family groomed? Before that child, once that child is targeted,
Mm-hmm.
that offender needs to have trust built between the parents and he or she,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how does that happen? Well, like I tell people all the time, the offender sometimes brings food to the potluck. They're
Mm-hmm.
at your book club, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking for the routines of the family. You may have known them for years. Once a sex offender targets a child, they begin to look at the routines of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Where is there a opportunity to isolate that child, right? And get access without anyone else being there.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes a simple ride from a neighbor's house home
Mm-hmm.
can facilitate that. Sometimes a coach, as we've seen so many times, sometimes a family friend or a family member, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it is a uncle or an aunt, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's a babysitter. These are trusting family members.
Mm-hmm.
93% know
Mm-hmm.
their sex offender.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them know them well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So isolation of the child, that means that I need to get access to that child, and then the grooming starts.
Mm-hmm.
once that child is isolated and away from people, the protectors,
Yeah.
right? And so if it's an older sibling, that older sibling might be tasked with taking care of their younger sibling while their mom and dad is not there. Well, isolation,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no one there to hear their cries or screams, which I
Mm-hmm.
tell people all the time,
Mm-hmm.
that's a possibility. But the other is sometimes simple sexual touch, which we call the groping piece.
Mm-hmm.
And children, they're so innocent and
Mm-hmm.
they're so naive that they don't know that someone would do this. And so when we look for the signs, children withdraw
Yeah.
from personal touch. They withdraw from that. They don't know anymore. And even the child begins to blame themselves because they feel as if they had some role to play in the reason why they were victimized.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have these conversations, make it easier to have these conversations so that children tell us when someone has touched them inappropriately. I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
a child tell me that they swatted me on the butt when I won a game,
Mm-hmm.
which is harmless, and also to tell me when they inched their hand up my leg in my skirt,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why um, parents need to understand the grooming process.
Mm-hmm.
Isolation is step 3 and 4, and then it's the sexual conversation. They
Mm-hmm.
start talking about these taboo topics that parents aren't going to talk to with their kids,
Mm-hmm.
and that fascinates a child who's not aware of what that means,
Yeah.
right? and,
Mm-hmm.
and then and then it escalates. Sometimes they might show sexual images, and then they start engaging in sexual touch,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why I say these conversations, the child needs to know the scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I feel um, it's defining things. I feel a lot of times, at least for a red flag, what I see is urgency. The amount of urgency. Like, it's okay to pause and slow down. When I think about, uh, I'm very cautious of saying step one, step two, but if we are educated
Hmm.
and knowing certain things, and having an open conversation, open stream that the son or daughter can talk to you and not feel like they're going to get in trouble if they said something, even if it's someone very close to them. Having saying that, you know, and that takes work. Communication takes work. It's not static. It's something that keeps growing. And as I would say, at least from my experience, is that if the communication is an active thing that you participate with your family, you usually do better. At least that's what I've seen. If you're actively make it intentional, say I want to, let's talk together. It's close family. Let's talk about what's been going on. It at least gives the avenue that the child, even though it's awkward, maybe it's unpleasant, or it's
Hmm.
what it feels safe enough to say, hey, so and so, I didn't like what he talked to me about, you know,
Right.
and that is that's those kind of conversations will only happen if you're already having a conversation. It won't happen at like the 11th hour. A lot of people, even when they're adults, they don't want to share.
Right.
And you're expecting a kid who's under 18 who doesn't even understand a lot of what this means,
Right.
providing that safe environment. And also just for parents, just educate yourself. Don't assume that things are just how they are or how they were. Educate as much as you can what it is. Just at the same time, understand that you're not going to be in the room. So, like at this, you can educate, but at the same time, I don't want you to be suspicious of everyone. But
Right.
at the same
Right.
time, have that balanced approach, because at the same time, you're just building a better communication, because this will help in other avenues, whether it's sexual abuse or drug abuse or
Absolutely.
alcohol. So this will help in
Absolutely.
a lot of your conversations moving forward. This one
I'm
quote,
glad you brought up alcohol,
yeah,
right?
hmm
Because when children are older, alcohol may be used as a way to obtain consent.
Yeah.
And that's very important. But creating the communication between the child and the parent
Hmm.
is so vital, because even if you are suspicious, let's just say you are suspicious about
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah. Yeah.
your child is giving you a replay of what happened while you were with that adult, or
Yeah.
that sibling,
Hmm.
and that needs to be open conversation. Tell me what happened,
Mm.
so I can tell you if I should be
Yeah.
suspicious, and I can keep you safe, right?
Yeah. And I feel like it's not. It's just. It's not like I would say I ever made it in the idea of communicating. I have got to the peak where I know how to communicate with everyone, or a family member. It's a constant thing. It's a constant thing that you would need to work on, because
Mhm.
people change. The kid will get older. What
Right.
used to work won't work later on.
Right.
So you got to have different approaches. You got to understand that there's other context with the kid. They may, so their personalities are different, their approaches are different, but I think consistency is the key.
Mm,
Consistency, at the very least, the kid feels that, okay, I don't really know my father. He kind of embarrasses me, but I know he'll show up. I know he'll show up. I
right.
know I could go to him if I really
Rely
feel.
on
Yeah,
him.
yeah. So this quote over here from Khalil Gibran, I find it interesting, especially with communication, social settings, or with your family or whatever. I'm pretty outspoken, so a lot of times I try to tell myself if I'm in a group to try to listen more. If you but in this one, I like how it explains how we learn things. I've learned silence from the talkative, toleration from the intolerant, and kindness from the unkind. Yet strange, I am ungrateful to these teachers. So, what do you when you see this quote? What comes to mind, Doctor?
One of the maintaining principles in psychology is active listening,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Which means you are silent and they are sharing.
Yeah.
And that means free of judgment, right?
Mm.
And so tolerance, and even though people use this word tolerance, I like to swap it out for acceptance,
Yeah.
right? Because if you have inclusive acceptance,
Mm.
then you can understand the fear, right? Because intolerance is sometimes based in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we look at kindness, well, it's always a better energy,
Mm.
expansion of energy
Mm.
to be kind. It's harder to be angry, right? You
Mm-hmm.
expend so much energy associated with being unkind. So I love this quote, right?
Yeah.
But the piece that really strikes me is ungrateful to these teachers, right? It is a little strange that we don't pay homage to someone who gave us our best lesson, even
Yeah.
though it was filled with conflict, right?
Yeah. That's why I always leave in the church setting, or even in my work, or I always find it, a lot of us try to congregate with people who think the same way, dress the same way, like the same things. But I would say
Right,
I learned the most from the people I did not care for too much. Tell you that much, I learned more for, and sometimes, because a lot of times it's when you're with people you agree with, there's just really no resistance. You're maybe at a
right,
restaurant, but a lot of times when you're with people who maybe have a different opposing view, sometimes you have to look at the mirror at yourself, and those times are really hard when you actually have to look at yourself in the mirror. I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, in my line of work, they'll save the world but not themselves. You know that that's
right,
and it's hard to see, because at the
right,
end of the day they're so concerned of everyone else. You talk about active listening, assertive communication. It's their needs are as justified as other ones. The idea is, if you don't want to do something, no is an appropriate answer. if
right,
you, but unfortunately, it's like, well, it's going to make them feel
bad.
bad,
Exactly.
and I feel like, where does you get in this conversation? When does your opinion matter. And then at the same time, I'm not saying, you were going to be aggressively communicating like, no, it's my way or the highway. But a
Hmm.
lot of what I see is passive. One thing I mentioned, I want to hear your thoughts about this theme. We're going to just kind of reflect on what building a safer community means to us, to you today. But for me, I feel when I'm with a client and I ask them, what do they're struggling. I'm like, what's your hobby? What do you like to do? And they're like, I don't, basically in essence, I don't deserve a hobby. I'm like, I don't have time. I'm not, I have so many other things to do. What are you talking about hobbies for? And I find it very intriguing because when I was struggling before myself, my friend asked me the same question. It's funny. Do you have a hobby? He liked fish tanks, and I'm like, no way, that's a lot of work. Salt water
Right.
fish. But he's like, it's good to have something you like to do, like some hobby. And I thought that was interesting because later on I understood what that
Hmm.
meant, because now I see people, they're doing but everything is towards a tangible need. But I'm like, a lot of times it's not shaped from the individual itself. It's I need to be better because so and so. Well, what does that mean? What does being healthy mean to you? What does being better mean to you? Well, this is what my folks say. This is what my family said. No, I want to hear what you
You
want.
think, yeah,
Think what that means to you. So,
exactly.
what do you, when the theme of this month is building a safer community, what does that mean to you in the context of what you're doing today, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, I love that you said hobbies, because when someone experiences trauma, they need to celebrate the healing process. Almost stamps out their voice, but
Mm-hmm.
they need to celebrate that child, that teen, that adult at that time frame, in that space, that stage of development in which they experience the trauma. So that inner child is still there, even though they experience sexual violence. That little girl or that little boy is still there, wanting to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what I tell my clients is that go and celebrate. If this happened at 6 years old, what did you like to do at 6 years old? Pick out the programs that you like to do. Did you like to jump rope? Did you hang out with your friends? Did you go to movies and eat popcorn? I have so many little nieces and nephews that love to just sit and watch Disney and eat their popcorn. So I tell people to celebrate that piece of themselves. More importantly, to recognize the inner child that has lost something
Mm-hmm.
because of that trauma. And 30 minutes for 2 weeks every day helps that inner child know that you are there, you protect them, you will always love them, you'll never leave them, you will always be their voice, and you will always, always keep them safe.
Mm-hmm.
And once that little child or little boy lost
Mm-hmm.
knows you're still there,
Mm-hmm.
fighting that good fight,
Mm-hmm.
you can find ways to enjoy again, feel that happiness. Some people are disconnected from their feelings. We call it dissociation,
Mm-hmm.
right? After the trauma, they're numb. This
Mm-hmm.
is a way to get those feelings
Mm-hmm.
reconnected, start plugging them back into your soul system, is what I call it,
Yeah.
and be able to light up those parts of your body that might have gone dim, might not be filled with light. And so what does that mean? I happen to have love now laters and bubble yum and gum and popping my gum. And so I got a jump rope, and every now and then I'll jump my rope and snap
Mm-hmm.
my gum, even though my mother hated it. And support her
Mm.
everything that she does, because she's still there,
Yeah.
right? Still wants to be recognized. She still wants to have fun. She wants to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I do is listen to Pandora comedy. Many people don't know Pandora has comedy. And I don't know how raunchy you like it, but I love comedy. Make
Yeah.
me laugh, and we are friends.
Yeah. It's for me, I just, I find that with coping skills, when talking around this track, I think the creative outlet is very cathartic. If you're good at something, or you just want to, you know music, some of the best songs are written are sad ones. I'll just say
Yeah.
it. Yeah, let's be honest. And
Country
also,
songs.
uh,
Country songs really make me cry.
it's just, it's something about, either I tell my clients, some of them write poetry. I'm like, do it again. If you have a guitar you haven't touched for a while, pick it up. A lot of times that cathartic way of expressing yourself, like you said, you're feeling, it's, working through that. And I think, finding those elements like you described, and comedy, I find a lot of times there's a lot of truth in comedy, which I love too. It's so on the line of truth, and it allows us to celebrate being human. The idea that we are human and we have faults. We're not awesome all the time, and that's
Mhm.
expected.
I
It's
call it the imperfect angel.
exactly. So I do feel like, every day is not a crisis. Okay, every day can't be a crisis. Find, like you said, mentioned with dissociation of emotions. A lot of times I work the definitions of what they are. Like when I
Mhm.
work with clients, I'm like
Mhm.
under the sadness tab, which one
Mhm.
really speaks to you under all this stuff? Because sometimes it's hard when you're in it, in the thick of it, to actually know
Mhm.
what you're actually feeling until you kind of
Mhm.
read it. Takes it kind of helps you along that way. But the safe community, the safe, building a safe place, actually, at least what I found, has helped germinate some of these ways of communicating, ways of healing. I want to say, any final thoughts you want to mention as we close? Uh,
Yes, absolutely. For parents who don't know how to start this conversation, I have children's books that children are the superheroes, right? The parents only come in when the secret needs to be told. And I call them the secret books because oftentimes a sex offender will ask that child or threaten that child to keep the secret. They
mm,
often say, I'm going to hurt your parent or hurt your mom or your siblings if you don't keep this secret. So there's a lot of secrecy surrounding this. So I have two children's books called Chat Keeps a Secret and Aaliyah Can't Tell Her Secret. And this is a short, small book for 5 to 9 year olds where you can start the conversation. Chad has a issue and his friends are the ones who notice it. His
mm,
little peer friends. And oftentimes that's exactly what happens. Kids will tell other kids.
mm,
And those strong kids need to bring in the adults to solve the problem.
mm,
And so you get to see the signs and you get to understand that. And so I love that parents can start the conversation. There are loads of books and resources for body boundaries
mm,
because I'll tell you, I have clients whose kids are 4 years old and it's happening to them,
mm,
right? And
mm,
people don't want to know that a 4 year old is being victimized. They don't have the words,
mhm.
right? But
Yeah.
they're telling you this because they want you to do something. So I say, more importantly, scenarios, conversations,
Mm,
and trust building, so that that child can give you a replay of what happened
mhm,
when they get back in the house, so that in the event that you need to step in, because you don't always need to step in,
mm,
children need to know sometimes, I'm going to tell my mother. It doesn't matter. You can say secret, but I'm going to tell my mother. I'm going to tell my father. I'm going to tell every adult I see because I don't like this. I don't feel good. I don't know what's happening.
mhm,
Right. And I feel confused, is one of the things they're going to say.
mm,
Confusion is what they're going to say. So
mhm.
pay attention to, the signs that a child is slowly withdrawing and not paying attention to the things they used to love.
And these books, you can find them online. There's a
Yes,
link, yeah. So
yes,
those
right,
who are,
100%.
yeah, those who are listening, I'll put it in the notes. So when you on the video, you'll be able to click on the link below this in the information part, and you could go find out more about these children's books. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa. I think it's important to continue the dialogue, continue conversation. I do appreciate each guest because it's not always easy, talking about these things, but because it's not easy, it needs to be done. It's
Right.
it's important, because Yes, it's messy. Yes, there's a million other conversations I'm sure a lot of people want to have. But the fact
Right.
of the matter is, remember the people that this may hurt, people that you may be able to protect. It's about the people. We go through all this stuff. I remember, this is my last thought.
Mhm.
I am cognizant of like the generation, my parents and my parents' parents. I have grace because they don't understand mental health because of the generation. And
Right.
the idea is bridging that, not putting, oh, you don't understand, but starting the conversation. When it comes to your kids, you may not understand, but it's an intentional, constant intentional. Just show up, talk to them, find ways to connect. You need extra material, look into these books that Lisa mentioned. Just start the dialogue. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be worrying every single day, but at the same time, just build your knowledge base. Know how, like, and understand that this is important. Doesn't mean it will happen, but at least you'll have be prepared if something does happen. And I just want to say thank you, Dr. Lisa, for coming on and sharing your insight. I just want to close by saying, you could
Thank you
find
so much for having me.
no problem. Remember to stay updated on all things Revive Ministries through the various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is the website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries. Leaving with this last quote. It's from Brené Brown. It says, "Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up even when you can't control the outcome."